I used to believe the worst kind of pain came from broken bones. I was wrong. The deepest wounds came from realizing the people who were supposed to protect me were the very ones willing to sacrifice me to protect a perfect image. For 15 years, my family buried the truth beneath polished smiles, expensive clothes, and carefully staged family photos. But the truth has a way of surviving, even when everyone around you pretends it never existed. My name is Emma Carter, and for most of my life I was the forgotten middle child in a family everyone admired. We lived in one of the nicest neighborhoods outside Boston, where every lawn looked perfect and every driveway held luxury cars. My father, Dr. Richard Carter, was a celebrated neurosurgeon whose reputation reached far beyond the city. My mother, Victoria Carter, spent her days organizing charity events and making sure everyone believed we were the definition of success. People constantly told us how lucky we were, never realizing that the most dangerous place in my life was inside our own home. My older sister Madison was the center of our parents' world. She was beautiful, brilliant, and talented at everything she touched. Straight A grades, championship swim meets, student leadership, volunteer work, and flawless manners made her the daughter every parent dreamed of having. Every conversation at home eventually became another opportunity to praise her accomplishments. My younger brother, Ethan, was the charming troublemaker who somehow escaped every consequence. No matter what mistake he made, our parents laughed it off as harmless. Then there was me, quiet, dependable, and almost invisible. I earned good grades, stayed out of trouble, and tried harder every year to earn even a few moments of genuine attention, but nothing I accomplished ever seemed important enough. Our family revolved around appearances. Sunday dinners looked like magazine advertisements with polished silverware, expensive china, and perfectly arranged meals. Before attending community events, my mother even coached us on what to say if anyone asked about our family. We were expected to smile, praise one another, and convince everyone that we were incredibly close. Behind those smiles, however, every compliment, achievement, and conversation felt like another competition for approval. Love inside our house always seemed conditional, earned only through perfection. Everything changed the day I discovered photography. My middle school art teacher loaned me an old camera after noticing how fascinated I was with light and composition. Looking through that lens became my escape from the constant pressure inside our house. Instead of photographing perfect gardens or expensive homes, I found myself drawn to cracked sidewalks, abandoned playgrounds, weathered buildings, and forgotten places. Imperfections fascinated me because they felt honest. They reminded me that beauty did not require perfection, something my family never understood. When I entered a local photography competition almost as an afterthought, I never expected to win. My collection explored loneliness and empty spaces, reflecting emotions I had never spoken aloud. To my complete surprise, the judges awarded me first place. A local newspaper published one of my photographs alongside a short interview, and for the first time in my life, my parents actually spoke about something I had accomplished. That brief attention lasted only one evening, but I noticed something I had never seen before. Madison barely touched her dinner, and the confidence that normally defined her had been replaced with quiet anxiety. She tried to dismiss my success as unimportant, yet the relief on her face when our parents shifted the conversation back to her achievements revealed something unexpected. She was terrified of sharing the spotlight. As the months passed, the pressure on Madison became impossible to ignore. She was determined to earn admission to Yale, the same university attended by several generations of our family. Every test score, swim competition, and extracurricular activity suddenly carried enormous weight. She studied late into every night, slept only a few hours, and pushed herself harder than anyone should. The perfect daughter everyone admired was slowly falling apart behind closed doors. Dark circles appeared beneath her eyes, her cheerful personality disappeared, and even her once flawless performances began slipping. Around the same time, I finally started building a life outside my family through my friendship with Lily Morales. Unlike everyone in my neighborhood, Lily never cared about status or appearances. Her parents owned a small family restaurant, and their home was filled with warmth, laughter, and honesty. Spending time with them showed me what a real family could feel like. My parents disliked our friendship almost immediately, insisting I should spend time with children from more influential families who could help my future. It was another reminder that, to them, relationships existed only if they improved our image. One evening during dinner, I gathered enough courage to tell my parents that I wanted to study photography after high school. The silence that followed felt unbearable. My father looked at me as though I had announced I intended to throw my future away. He calmly explained that photography belonged in the category of hobbies, not careers. According to him, I would attend medical school just like he had planned. My mother smiled politely while suggesting I could always keep taking pictures during weekends after becoming a doctor. Neither of them asked what I wanted. My future had already been decided without me. What surprised me most was Madison. Instead of agreeing with our parents, she quietly suggested that I should pursue photography because I was genuinely talented. Her words sounded supportive, but something about them felt rehearsed rather than sincere. I sensed she had another reason for speaking up, though I could not understand what it was. Only a few days later, I accidentally overheard my parents arguing with Madison behind my father's office door. They criticized her for receiving a grade that most students would celebrate, insisting Yale expected perfection and nothing less. My sister tried explaining how exhausted she was and admitted she barely slept anymore, but they ignored every word. Then my mother claimed I had reported seeing Madison wasting time with friends instead of studying. The accusation stunned me because it was completely false. I had never said anything of the sort. Standing silently in the hallway, I realized my parents were using me as a weapon against my own sister, creating conflict where none existed. That moment planted the first real seed of fear inside me, because if they could lie so easily to manipulate one daughter, I wondered what else they were capable of hiding. As the weeks passed, Madison became someone I barely recognized. She constantly watched me with a strange expression that felt less like anger and more like calculation. One afternoon I discovered my photography portfolio completely ruined. Every print I had spent months preparing for college applications had been soaked with water, and the memory card containing my digital backups had disappeared. My heart sank as I stared at the destroyed work, knowing it had not happened by accident. I confronted Madison, but instead of denying it with panic, she looked almost amused. She calmly told me that no one cared about my photographs and reminded me that she was the only child in our family who truly mattered. She even encouraged me to tell our parents, because she knew they would blame my carelessness instead of believing her capable of something so cruel. Walking away from her room, I realized I had never actually known my own sister. Needing time to think, I climbed through my bedroom window onto the small section of roof where I often sat with my camera. It was the only place that ever felt peaceful. A few minutes later, Madison joined me. To my surprise, she apologized for ruining my portfolio and admitted the pressure from school had pushed her too far. For a brief moment I wanted to believe her. Then she pulled a prescription bottle from her pocket that belonged to someone else. She confessed she had been taking stimulants to keep up with impossible expectations. I begged her to stop before she destroyed herself, but she insisted the pills were not the real problem. According to her, the real problem was anything that distracted our parents from seeing her as perfect. My photography, my growing confidence, and the little attention I had finally received had become threats she could not tolerate. Her voice became frighteningly calm as she stepped closer. She said some problems required permanent solutions. Before I could react, both of her hands slammed into my shoulders. I felt myself losing balance as the roof disappeared beneath my feet. Time slowed into scattered memories of spinning sky, rough shingles scraping my hands, and the terrible realization that my own sister had chosen to let me die. The impact against the stone patio shattered nearly every part of my body. I could not move or breathe. The last thing I saw before everything faded was Madison staring down from the roof with horror replacing the cold determination that had filled her face only seconds earlier. When I woke in the hospital, every breath felt like broken glass. My ribs, pelvis, and lung had all been badly damaged. Before I could even process the pain, my parents began rehearsing the story they expected me to tell. According to them, I had climbed onto the roof to take photographs, slipped, and fallen. Madison was now the brave sister who had tried to save me. A police officer arrived to record a statement, but my mother insisted I was too confused from medication to remember anything. My father confidently answered every question for me, creating a perfect accident report while I lay there trapped between pain and disbelief. Later that night my father returned alone. Instead of asking how I felt, he calmly explained why I needed to protect the family. He admitted Madison had lost control but had insisted that reporting her would destroy her future at Yale and ruin our family name. He spoke as if my shattered body were simply unfortunate collateral damage. When I whispered that she had tried to kill me, he dismissed it as an emotional exaggeration. At that moment I finally understood the truth. My parents already knew exactly what had happened. They had simply decided that protecting Madison mattered more than protecting me. Recovery became another prison. Every appointment involved doctors connected to my father, every visitor was monitored, and every conversation reminded me to repeat the accident story. The only person who refused to accept it was my best friend Lily. She secretly visited the hospital while my parents were away and handed me my camera, which she had found hidden near the patio where I landed. The memory card was still inside. She also told me a hospital social worker named Mrs. Brooks had been trying repeatedly to speak with me alone, but my parents kept delaying the meetings. For the first time since the fall, hope quietly returned. When Mrs. Brooks finally entered my room, she did not pressure me. She simply asked how I remembered the accident. Years of conditioning almost forced me to repeat the lie, but something in her calm voice made me realize not everyone expected obedience. Even though I still lacked the courage to reveal everything, she left me her private contact information and gently reminded me that truth deserved a safe place to exist. Those words stayed with me long after she walked away. A few months later, during a routine follow-up, a new physician named Dr. Elena Ramirez reviewed fresh X-rays alongside the originals from the day of my injuries. Almost immediately her expression changed. She asked my mother to leave the room, explaining that patients my age had the right to speak privately with their doctor. Once we were alone, she pointed toward the images and quietly explained that my injuries did not match a simple fall. The fracture pattern strongly suggested that I had been pushed with significant force. Hearing those words broke something inside me. For months I had questioned my own memory because everyone around me insisted I was confused. Now medical evidence confirmed what I had known from the very beginning. Through tears, I told Dr. Ramirez everything. I described the destroyed portfolio, the pills, the confrontation on the roof, and the push that nearly ended my life. She listened without interrupting before explaining that she was legally required to report what I had told her because this was no accident. My parents could no longer bury the truth beneath polished smiles and carefully rehearsed lies. The evidence was finally speaking louder than they ever could. Everything happened faster than I ever imagined. Before my parents could regain control of the situation, hospital security arrived along with a detective and a representative from Child Protective Services. My father immediately switched into the confident voice that had convinced patients, colleagues, and neighbors for years. He insisted there had been a misunderstanding and claimed my injuries resulted from reckless behavior. My mother cried on cue, begging everyone not to upset me while I recovered. It was another carefully rehearsed performance, one I had watched my entire life. The difference was that this time, someone had evidence they could not explain away. Dr. Elena Ramirez calmly placed my original X-rays beside the updated ones and explained that the injuries showed clear signs of force from behind before the fall. She also pointed out several inconsistencies in my original medical records that deserved further investigation. For the first time, my father had no convincing answer. His reputation, his influence, and his carefully crafted image suddenly meant very little against physical evidence. The detective turned toward me and gently asked if I was finally ready to tell my story. My hands trembled, but I nodded. Every word that left my mouth felt like breaking another chain that had kept me silent for years. I told them everything. I described growing up invisible inside a family obsessed with perfection. I explained how Madison became terrified whenever attention shifted away from her, how she destroyed my photography portfolio, confessed to abusing prescription stimulants, and finally pushed me from the roof because she believed I had become another obstacle standing between her and the future she desperately wanted. I also explained how my parents immediately created the accident story and pressured me to protect both Madison and our family reputation. By the time I finished speaking, the room had fallen completely silent. The investigation moved quickly after that. Officers searched our home and discovered multiple prescription bottles hidden inside Madison's room, each prescribed to different people. They also recovered messages and journal entries that painted a disturbing picture of someone willing to do anything to maintain the perfect image our parents demanded. One entry described my fall as a problem solved and even admitted that sympathy from the accident had helped strengthen her college application. Reading those words hurt more than any broken bone ever could. I realized she had never seen me as a sister. I had simply become another obstacle she believed she had the right to remove. My parents continued denying responsibility, but every new piece of evidence weakened their story. Doctors admitted there had been concerns about my injuries from the beginning. Nurses remembered being discouraged from asking questions. Hospital administrators launched their own investigation into the original treatment, and my father's influence inside the medical community quickly disappeared. The reputation my parents had spent decades protecting collapsed in only a few weeks because it had always been built on lies. Child Protective Services refused to send me back home while the investigation continued. Without hesitation, Lily family welcomed me into their apartment above the restaurant. It was not large or luxurious, but for the first time I experienced something I had never known before. No one cared about appearances. We laughed together while cooking dinner, celebrated small victories, and listened to each other without judgment. I finally understood that a loving family is measured by honesty and kindness, not money or social status. The legal process continued for months. Because Madison was still a teenager, the court focused on treatment as well as accountability. She lost her place at Yale and entered a long psychiatric rehabilitation program. My parents faced serious consequences for helping hide the truth and interfering with the investigation. Watching everything fall apart was painful, but I no longer blamed myself for their choices. They had sacrificed their own integrity long before they sacrificed mine. With help from Mrs. Brooks and several advocacy organizations, I rebuilt the college applications my parents had secretly sabotaged. My photography portfolio looked very different now. Instead of abandoned buildings and empty streets, I photographed recovery, resilience, and quiet moments of hope after unimaginable pain. Those images earned me a scholarship to one of the best photography schools in the country. For the first time, my future belonged to me instead of someone else. My younger brother, Noah, struggled more than anyone. He had believed every lie because he wanted to believe our family was perfect. Months later, he reached out and quietly admitted he no longer knew what the truth looked like. We rebuilt our relationship slowly, one honest conversation at a time. Unlike the family we grew up in, we promised each other we would never protect appearances over reality again. People often ask whether I forgave my sister. The truth is that forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. I eventually let go of the hatred because carrying it only kept me connected to the worst day of my life. But forgiveness never erased what happened, and it certainly did not erase accountability. Some actions permanently change relationships, and pretending otherwise only creates new lies. Looking back now, I understand something that took years to learn. The X-rays did far more than expose broken bones. They exposed a broken family that had spent years choosing reputation over love, perfection over honesty, and appearances over truth. My injuries healed much faster than the emotional wounds, but every scar reminds me that surviving gave me something far more valuable than the perfect life I once wanted. It gave me my voice. Today, I no longer photograph perfection. I photograph reality because real life is messy, imperfect, and honest. Every time I press the shutter, I remember the lesson that changed everything. Lies can survive for years inside beautiful houses and smiling family portraits, but truth has a remarkable way of finding the light. And when it finally does, no amount of money, influence, or carefully rehearsed stories can force it back into the shadows. If there is one thing I hope you take away from my story, it is this. Never allow anyone to convince you that protecting their image matters more than protecting your life. The people who truly love you will never ask you to stay silent about your pain. Sometimes speaking the truth costs you the family you were born into. But it also gives you the chance to build the family you truly deserve. And in the end, that is exactly what saved me.